In this lecture, we're going to look at how to use the lifecycle hooks in our application. We'll be working with the code we had in the previous lecture. The very first hook is the beforeCreate hook. We can use this hook by adding it to the configuration object we passed into the createApp function. This goes for the other hooks too. It will be on the same level as the data property. The value must be a function. This hook is called before the Vue instance is initialized. At this moment, we won't have access to the data because Vue hasn't created the proxy methods. The instance will not be reactive. We're going to console.log a message to prove that this method gets called, beforeCreate function called. Along with it, we're going to log the message property we have inside the data object. We'll see the results of this soon enough, but let's keep moving forward. The next lifecycle is the created hook. This hook will be set to a function. All lifecycles are functions. I'm going to copy the log message we used in the beforeCreate lifecycle. We'll make a modification to the message to help indicate which lifecycle this message is being logged from. Everything else will leave the same. We'll be performing the same test as before. The next lifecycle we'll take a look at is the beforeMount lifecycle. This hook gets triggered once the template has been compiled, but hasn't been added onto the page yet. We'll paste in the same message as before, but change the name to beforeMount and set the second log to this.$el. I'm introducing a new property called $el. Its value will be the element Vue is mounted to. It's available once Vue has been mounted. You'll be able to see the value once we run the code. Up next, we have the mounted lifecycle. This hook gets called after the template is mounted onto the page. At this point, we have a fully functioning application. We're going to log the same message we had for the beforeMount hook, but change the hook's name to mounted. Alright, let's test our code. Go ahead and refresh the page. The application will work like normal. Let's view the console to see what appears. We will have a total of 4 messages. The first message is from the beforeCreate lifecycle. This hook gets called before the Vue instance proxies our data and methods. It's the first in the series of lifecycle hooks. Taking a closer look, we'll see that the message property we tried logging is set to undefined. This is because the data property hasn't been proxied yet. Therefore, the this object won't be able to print to our data properly. This limited scope goes for our methods too. The next method is from the created lifecycle. The data and methods in the instance have been proxied. This is proven by the fact that we're able to log the message data property successfully. Then we have the message from the beforeMount lifecycle. For the second message, we logged the $element property. This property will be set to null because the application doesn't have access to the template yet. Lastly, we have a message from the mounted lifecycle. Unlike previously, the $element property will hold the template after it's been compiled. The expression is no longer present. It's been interpolated to the message data property. These are the first 4 lifecycle hooks. It's pretty clear what each one does. The most important thing to understand is what you have access to inside each of them. Some lifecycle functions will provide you with very little, while others give you access to everything. One of the main questions I get asked by students is the difference between the created and mounted lifecycles. The mounted lifecycle is only triggered once the template is compiled and inserted into the document. We'll have access to the template if we need to make changes to it. If you need the template rendered on the document, you need to use the mounted lifecycle. If you only need the data, then you can use the created lifecycle. Alright, let's move on to the rest of the lifecycles. The next set of lifecycles are for when updates occur. Let's go back to the editor. The first one is the beforeUpdate lifecycle. This hook gets called whenever an update in our data occurs, But before these changes are applied to the template, I'll log the following message before update function called. We will not be logging a second message. Unfortunately, we don't have access to which property was updated. This hook will get triggered upon any changes to the data. Like I said before, this is usually used for debugging, but you can also update additional data if you need to. The last lifecycle is called updated. I'll log the message updated function called. Alright, let's give things a test. I'll refresh the page. We will see everything work as before. The updated lifecycle hooks are called on changes. We don't have a way to change the data inside the document, but we do have the Vue developer tools. Inside the Vue developer tools, we can access the data inside the application. The developer tools allow us to change the data without having to create a UI. This tool can be helpful for quickly debugging an application. We'll change the message property to something else really quick. The changes will be reflected in the document since we're using an expression that outputs the message data properly. If I were to switch back to the console, you would see the new lifecycle messages appear. They are thus giving us a clear indication that the correct functions were called. The lifecycle functions we're using will be called whenever an update occurs. The last set of lifecycle functions we'll look at are for when the instance is destroyed. Let's take a look at those now. Switch back to the editor. Inside the Vue instance, we'll add the before unmount lifecycle. This hook gets triggered before the instance is unmounted. This hook will allow us to perform last-minute changes. We still have access to the data and methods in the Vue instance. The app is fully functional. We'll log the message before unmount function called. The next lifecycle is called unmounted. This hook gets triggered after the instance is unmounted. Any directives or events you previously had are gone. We'll log the message. Alright, let's give things a test. Refresh the page. No errors will appear so far. Now the question is, how do we unmount the instance? Vue provides us with a method called unmount. Inside the console, we'll use the VM object and call this method. The method requires we pass in the element where our application is mounted to. This is because Vue needs to know where to remove the template it renders. This method will unmount the instance from the document. After calling this method, we will see both messages appear. The template has been removed from the document. We won't even see the uncompiled version of the template. The page is completely empty. We will not be able to interact with the application anymore. The data, events, bindings, and directives are all gone. That's the lifecycle hooks in a nutshell. They're pretty powerful and allow us to access different parts of Vue. You most likely won't use all the lifecycle hooks, but they are there when you need them. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the lifecycle documentation page. It has a diagram like the one I showed you before. It has more info though. The chart I showed you is a more simplified version of the Vue lifecycle. I showed you a stripped down version because there are more topics we haven't gone over yet. This diagram would have been more confusing to explain than what I had. Surely enough, we will go over some of the missing pieces. For now, you will be good with what I've shown you. By the end of this course, you will be able to understand this diagram Vue has provided fully.